The Los Angeles Rams have begun the 2025 season 5-2 and currently hold the lead in the NFC West. With superstars like Davante Adams, Puka Nacua, Matthew Stafford, and Jared Verse, this team is looking like one of the best teams in the entire NFL. So in today's video, I want to talk about the LA Rams and why I think this team is becoming one of the most scariest teams in the NFL. Subscribe and like the video if you guys do go on to enjoy. Let's hop into it. So we're going to begin this video off by talking about the depth chart, the offense, defense. Then I want to talk about the rest of their schedule and what we can expect from this team moving forward. Let's go ahead and start off with the offense. This is where the playmakers are. Davante Adams, Puka Nacua. Hey, my guy Jay Witt, Jordan Whittington, shout out to that guy. Kyron Williams has gotten some really good play this year, of course. Then Matthew Stafford. Let's go ahead and look at the numbers first because I think the numbers give you a good idea as to where they stack up. On offense, they rank 12th in points per game with 25.0 points per game, 6th in yards per game, and 10th in touchdowns per game. They also rank in the top half of basically every statistic minus the third down conversion rates. This is not a great running football team, as you guys can see the numbers on your screen. They only run the football just a little under 41%, which is the 21st lowest in the NFL. They're 20th in yards per rush, 22nd in rushing yards per game, and 23rd in rushing touchdowns per game. But passing the football, as you guys can see, is definitely a strong suit for this roster. They're 19th in completion percentage, 9th in yards per pass, 3rd in passing yards per game, 3rd in interception thrown rate, and 5th in quarterback sack rate. I know I just threw a bunch of numbers at you guys, but I think this kind of gives you a detailed breakdown as to what this team is good at and what they can still work on. Let's start off with the passing game, which has been really good, as you guys can see from the numbers, and, well, it makes sense. When you have a Puka Nacua, when you have a Davante Adams, when you have a decent enough offensive line that can protect your superstar quarterback, it would just make sense for your team to be better at that thing. Let's also not forget, they were pretty aggressive in fixing, and I guess not fixing, but adding to this passing game. Adding guys like Terrence Ferguson, and of course the big move for Davante Adams. So far this year, it has absolutely paid dividends. One of the complaints that you do have with the Matthew Stafford since his time with the Rams is that he is a little bit interception prone. Obviously, 2021 was his best year with the team. He had 41 touchdowns. He also had 17 interceptions. The next year, 10 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, then 24 and 11, then 20 and 8. Well, so far in 2025, he's got 17 touchdowns in just 7 games and only 2 interceptions during that stretch. And I think there's a little bit of several reasons as to why. Number one, this team has a really functional ground game that makes life a lot easier for a quarterback. I also think arguably the biggest reason is because he has a down the field threat. I don't think it's a coincidence that his best year in the NFL with the LA Rams was the same year that he had in Odell Beckham that could win down the field and can do some similar things that we see in Davante Adams. Guys like Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, they have a lot of similarities to their game. So there's a lot of easier ways for defense to cover those guys. Well, when you have a guy like a Davante Adams who can win downfield and can do all sorts of things intermediate and is just one of the best route runners in the game despite him being in his 30s now, having that guy on the outside paired up with the Puka Nacua, it just spaces out the offense a lot more and it makes things a lot easier for Matthew Stafford to dissect the defense. He also just has a bit more reliability too, because in past years, there'd be times where, let's be honest, Cooper Kupp couldn't stay healthy. Puka Nacua, who has been a little bit banged up this year, has mostly been healthy, and Davante Adams has been healthy the entire year. So having both those guys out there just makes life a lot easier. Puka Nacua, prior to the injuries, was one of the favorites to win the Offensive Player of the Year. I mean, on the season, he's got 54 receptions for 616 yards and 2 touchdowns in the receiving game. You pair that up with the Davante Adams, who's got 31 receptions for 431 yards and then 6 touchdowns, you kind of get the idea as to how these guys are being used. Puka Nacua is more of the heavy usage guy. This is somebody that you're going to get 8 to 12 targets a game with, and you want him toting the rock, 6 or 8 times a game. Whereas Davante Adams, he might not get as much volume, but he's winning a lot more down the field. He's winning inside the red zone, and when you need a clutch third down, man, you got Puka Nacua, who's one of the most reliable weapons out there with some of the best hands and a knack for getting open. And then Davante Adams is one of the most shiftiest, nuanced route runners out there, so on third downs, it makes life quite easy to make big plays down the field. Having both these guys in the receiving game has really allowed Matthew Stafford to not necessarily take a step forward, but be the Matthew Stafford that we want him to be. And again, you now pair up what is a really great passing attack with a run game that is not bad by no means. I know I read the numbers and they were, bottom half in the NFL, but this is a very functional running game. They can 100% run the football. Kyren Williams on the year, 107 carries for 472 yards and 2 touchdowns. They have not been able to really consistently get the big plays going down the field. Like, they have no really big runs on the season. Their biggest run from their 2 running backs would just be a 20-yard gain. So I think that's another thing they can start to open up in their offense, is just getting some more explosive run plays down the field. Not that this team really needs more explosive plays, because they have a Puka Nacua and a Devontae Adams that can consistently win down the field. But once they get this ground game more involved, I think they would definitely benefit from it. I think because of all the new additions to the receiving game, the passing game has been more of the emphasis and focus with this team. I think once they can, start to balance things out a little bit better, you're going to see this ground game be even more a part of this offense. So it's really nice to see a very balanced unit for the LA Rams. This unit on the offensive end reminds me a lot more of that 2021, their Super Bowl season. Like, it just reminds me more of that, with a guy like Puka Nacua, who could be your theoretical Cooper Kupp. And then you have your Devontae Adams, who's just a better version of what Odell was for that team that year. Having that outside presence, and then having a guy in Puka Nacua who can be moved all around the offense. You could even use him as a running back, which they've done a couple times. It really makes this offense that much more unpredictable. But then you look at this offensive line, and look, for the most part, this has been a really solid unit for this team. Now, I wouldn't necessarily say this is the best offensive line out there and they don't need anything in the future, because I do think tackle is something they should look at in the future. Havenstein's getting up there with age, and Alaric Jackson's had some injury issues the past, few months, so we just gotta have to keep an eye on that. But generally speaking, for this year, it looks really good, especially the interior. On the year, they've only given up 11 sacks through 7 games, which is an average of just under 2 sacks per game. They have a quarterback sack rate that's the 5th best in the NFL with a 4.3%. We talked about that a little bit earlier. For comparison's sake, the worst in the NFL is the New York Jets. A lot of that's on Justin Fields. The O-line's not that bad, but Justin Fields has an 11.57% sack rate. And again, the LA Rams, a 4.3%. The lowest in the NFL, for reference, is the Denver Broncos with a 2.7%. They probably got the best offensive line, but the Rams are definitely in good company here. You're looking at some of the best teams in the NFL that have a lower quarterback sack rate. We're talking Indianapolis, Denver, Seattle Seahawks, Green Bay Packers, Kansas City Chiefs, etc., etc. Again, I think long-term, maybe you want to take a tackle. It's important to say they do have 2 first-round picks this year in a not-so-great tackle class, but there is some talented pieces. I could definitely see them using one of their 2 first-round picks on adding an offensive tackle. Just maybe somebody to develop or start at right tackle next year. For the rest of this season, it's really freaking good. So we talked a lot about the offense. There's a lot of good things about this unit, and I still think there's more to unlock. We haven't really gotten to see Terrence Ferguson all the way too. I think we want to see a bit more from him moving forward. And I think there's more to unlock with this ground game, especially if they can start to make some big chunk plays down the field. I think there's more potential for this offense to be even better from what it already is this year. That kind of tells you just how high I am on this offense. They're looking really good in theory. Let's see if they can take that next step. Now, on the defensive side of things, this is another really good unit for this team. On the season, they're 3rd in opponents' points per game, only allowing 16.7. They're number 13 in opponents' yards per game. They're 1st in opponents' touchdowns per game, 4th on opponents' 3rd down conversion rate, and 1st on opponent red zone scoring percentage. They're really solid against the run, and they're really solid against the pass. This has been a unit that, for the most part, has been really good this year, and they have been tested a few times. Now, I do want to say this. In their 3 toughest matchups, the defense has not necessarily been dominant per se. A lot of this numbers and a lot of the reason for why they're so highly ranked is because of some of the matchups. Let's just look at their schedule. Week 1, they only gave up 9 points to one of the worst offenses in the NFL in the Houston Texans. Then the following week, they gave up 19 points to the Tennessee Titans, another team that has one of the worst offenses in the league. Skipping over a few, in week 6, you went up against the Baltimore Ravens and only gave up 3 points. That was without Lamar Jackson, and that was with Cooper Rush playing for most of the game. So not much to take away from that one. And then this past week, the Jacksonville Jaguars, I'll give them credit, only giving up 7 points to an offense that, beat the Kansas City Chiefs. That's an impressive stat. But when you look at that stretch between weeks 3 to 5, they went up against the Philadelphia Eagles and gave up 33. Now, to be fair, the defense was locked down for the entire first half. And then in the second half, they started to throw the ball a bit more air raid style, it felt like, and A.J. Brown made some nasty plays in this team. So regardless, 33 points is a lot of points. Then they beat the Colts, and they only allowed 20, but then you kind of peel back the curtain and realize the Colts left 14 points on the board with a holding penalty on Adonai Mitchell, and then an Adonai Mitchell on the, fumble across the goal line. So that would have been a 34-point game had those, ended up in points. Still, though, you play the game, you only gave up 20, it should have been 34. And then week 5, they gave up 26 to Mac Jones and Kendrick Bourne. Not really what you want to hear from an elite defense. So again, I'm not trying to discredit this defense by no means. They have guys that are playing at a very high level. Let's talk about them. Byron Young is one of the best edge rushers in the NFL right now. 9 sacks on the season. He also has 24 solo tackles. He's having a stellar season. Also 9 tackles for loss. I know PFF is not like the most accurate thing in the world, but an 84.8 pass rush grade, an 85.0 defensive grade for Byron Young. He's gotten better year in and year out, and this really feels like the season where he's going to be in Pro Bowls. He might even be an All-Pro this year. He's having that special of a season. Then, of course, let's talk about our guy, Jared Verse. I mean, look, the numbers are not super flashy for Verse, but I think it's also important to recognize that Verse is not this high-volume player. Like, I don't know if Verse is ever going to get 13, 14 sacks, but he's always going to be hovering around that 10 sack range and just be a really big disruptor. And that's what he's been this year. So far through 7 games, 4 sacks. I think he's probably going to end up with nearly 10 around that range. He's got 7 tackles for loss. He's also really solid against the run. Again, going back to PFF, a 90.1 defensive grade with an 87.7 pass rush grade, 66.4 run defensive grade, but I think he's a little bit better than what that might indicate. He's having a really good year, and for a guy that last year had a really good defensive rookie of the year type season, this year he's taken another step forward, which has been really fun to watch. You got some young guys too, like Josiah Stewart, who's got 2 sacks in the season. He's going to start to come on a little bit more. He's also got 2 tackles for loss and 2 pass deflections, so shout out to him. Talk about our guy, Nate Landman. Nate Landman leads the team with total tackles on 67. He's also got 1.5 sacks, and via PFF has a 73.4 linebacker grade. And that was something that we had question marks heading into the season. What were the linebackers going to look like? So far, they've been really good. Omar Spade, 65.4 PFF grade. Nate Landman, 73.4. I came into the season talking about how I thought Pooh Paul Jr. was going to be the starter. I was wrong. These guys have been really good at the linebacker position, and this feels like this might be a duo moving forward you can kind of build around. They've been really solid so far this year. I think if there is a weak spot on this team, it would probably be somewhere in the cornerback room. Not to say it's a bad unit or anything like that, but I do believe maybe they're missing like a true CB1. And I feel like that's maybe been the issue the past couple years, where they've had these really good deep secondaries, but they've just never quite had true number 1. Because on the season, you're looking at guys like Darius Williams, Kobe Durant, Akilla Witherspoon is on IR. They'll hopefully get him back. They also just made a trade for Roger McCreary, who is a bit more of like a slot / nickel corner. So we'll see if he gets involved. But they also have Quentin Lake. I feel like your safeties are pretty good. Cam Curl and Cameron Kitchens, you feel pretty good about. Again, I do want to say that I think this team is missing a true CB1. But as I talked about when I talked about the offensive line, they have 2 first-round picks. So while I expect them to take a quarterback with one of those to build behind Matthew Stafford, I wouldn't be surprised if they say, let's go take a right tackle and let's go take a CB1 in the draft. Like, imagine a world where you hypothetically get a Jermon McCoy or a Mansour Delane, or maybe even Avion Terrell. If you can get one of those guys with one of your 2 picks, and then hypothetically you take a, either a Spencer Fana or maybe Caden Proctor. I don't know if he's going to be a first-round pick, but maybe somebody like that. Just something like that. Francis Moegawa. Like, there's a lot of different pieces you can add to this team to make them that much better. So when you look at this unit, when you look at the offense, you're looking at one of the best offenses in the NFL. And when you look at this defense, you're also looking at a defense that is very good. And by the way, I wouldn't be surprised if they make a move at the trade deadline to try and add some more pieces to this team to give them that much more of a better chance to potentially go all in for a Super Bowl this year. I think that's totally on the table. I have said this in a lot of different videos, and I'll say it here again. If you want to be a team that wins a Super Bowl, I think you have to have a borderline top 10 offense and a borderline top 10 defense. You look at every single team that have won Super Bowls the past couple of years, minus maybe a few outliers here and there. Most of the time, you're looking at teams that have a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense. Look at the Chiefs for all those years. Top 10 offense, top 10 defense. Look at the Eagles last year. Top 10 offense, top 10 defense. You just keep going down the list. The Patriots Patriots for all those years, they had it. The Denver Broncos, when they won their Super Bowl, they had it. The Seattle Seahawks, they had it. Like, you just kind of look at the landscape of the NFL and all the Super Bowl champions, and even the teams that just make the Super Bowl, typically they have a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense in that respective year. And when you look at the LA Rams, as of today, through week 7, barring, anything miraculous happening injury-wise, of course, knock on wood, I look at this Rams team and I say they have a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense, which to me makes them a contender in the NFL. Let's go ahead and look at their schedule the rest of the way, because as I've mentioned, they are 5-2, and as I'm looking at the schedule, they have a couple challenges up ahead, which makes this team very fun and interesting moving forward. We're going to do this 2 games at a time, just kind of looking throughout this. They just came off a bye week this week, so next week they got the New Orleans Saints and then the San Francisco 49ers afterwards. I think they'll win both those games. Now, I do suspect San Francisco might have their starting quarterback in Brock Purdy back, as well as a couple other pieces too, so we'll keep an eye on that one. They did lose the first one. I do think they'll be a little bit ticked off and trying to get some revenge, although it will be at San Francisco. We'll see if they can respond, because I think they definitely can. So if they go 2-0 in that stretch, that'll put them at 7-2. Then they have a really good next 2 set of games. They got the Seattle Seahawks and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think both these teams are also in the conversation to be true contenders. I think Seattle has a great chance of winning their division, and I think Tampa Bay, they'll win their division. These are 2 very good football teams. I think the goal for the Rams, can you split them? Or can you somehow win both? If you can do that, you'll feel really good. I'm going to just say they split those games. Then you got Carolina, Arizona, should be able to win both those games. Week 15, week 16, you have another tough set of games there too, in the Detroit Lions and then the Seattle Seahawks again. Again, as I mentioned in the other little tough duo set with the Bucks and the Seahawks, can you split this or can you win both? I think they could beat Detroit. I think they could beat Seattle, but can you split them? Because it's going to be really tough. Those are 2 very good teams. Then to end the season off, you have the Falcons and the Arizona Cardinals. I think those are also winnable games, though you just never know what version of Atlanta you're going to get. You get a good version of Atlanta, that's a really good football team, so it'll be very interesting. So hypothetically, let's just say they split both those 2, those 4 weeks we talked about, the Seahawks Bucks set and the Detroit Lions Seattle Seahawks set. If you split those ones, then you're looking at a team that would end the season with 4 losses and 13 wins. Let's just say in those 4 tough games they go 1-3. Well, that would put you at a 12-5 football team and firmly in the conversation to make the playoffs and of course win the division. And even worst case scenario, let's say they somehow lose all 4 of those games. They would be an 11-6 football team that would still make the playoffs. This is a very winnable schedule, but I like that there are challenges. Sometimes you have these teams that maybe have like 1 or 2 challenges the entire season, and they just kind of cruise to the playoffs and feel really good and confident about themselves. Then they get into the playoffs and get smacked around because, hey, the playoffs have really good football teams. That's not going to be the case for the LA Rams. This is a tough schedule. They've already had a couple tough challenges. You passed one at Indianapolis, which, by the way, probably the best win of the season amongst any team out there, because that Colts team is really freaking good this year. And keep it a stack, probably should have beat the Philadelphia Eagles too. If it wasn't for a second half collapse, or of course the field goal block, you win that game. So you can kind of feel good about that loss. Even if it was a loss at the end of the day, you got to feel good about it. And you're going to be tested further down the season. Both those Seattle games are going to be pivotal for this division. I think, frankly, the winner of those 2 games might decide who wins the division. Right now, I lean towards the LA Rams. I don't think Seattle's out of the conversation. They have a really good chance too, and they got a really good roster as well. You got Tampa Bay and Detroit too, 2 very tough teams that are also going to be in the playoffs. So the nice thing about this Rams team, when you go to the playoffs, you've already faced off against Philadelphia. You've already squared off against Seattle. You've already squared off against the Bucks and the Lions and maybe even the San Francisco 49ers. So all of the really good quality teams in the NFC, you've already faced them, minus the Green Bay Packers. But I don't know if the Packers will face off against the Rams. We'll have to wait and see. They've already squared off against them. So when they get into the playoffs, it's like, hey, we already have a game plan for you. We already seen your adjustments to it. We have an idea. Now, granted, so does the other team, but you kind of get my points. And when you get a guy in Sean McVay that's one of the best coaches out there, I would expect him to put together a really good game plan against a team that you've either lost to or have beaten. I think it really does put this Rams team into a nice spot here. They have a favorable schedule the rest of the way with some really tough challenges that will prove to us whether or not this team is actually legitimately good. I'm excited for this team. I think they have a win now roster. They also have the extra draft capital this year to start building towards the future, so they can be the one team that sort of plays both sides, kind of like the San Antonio Spurs did for all those years, where they're developing young talent and getting younger, while also being able to contend for championships as long as Matthew Stafford is here. It will be interesting, and this is a conversation that we'll talk about later in the offseason about what they're going to do with the quarterback room, because Stafford has definitely flirted with retirement. I don't know if he'll retire this year. I think he might have one more year in him, depending on how this season goes. If they win a Super Bowl this year, I think he might retire. But if not, I could see him coming back for 1, maybe 2 more years, which puts this team in a good spot to potentially take a quarterback. I would not be surprised if this team either trades up or just goes out of their way to take a quarterback. I'm looking at names: Fernando Mendoza, Dante Moore, maybe Lenore Sellers, but probably not. Sam Levitt, Garrett Nussmeier, Drew Aller. I mean, the list just keeps going on and on. Ty Simpson, I can't forget him. There's a great chance that this LA Rams team is going to be looking at some of those quarterbacks and scouting them quite heavily to the understudy of Matthew Stafford. But again, we'll get to that conversation later in the offseason. As it goes for this year, I like their chances, but you let me know in the comment section below, what are your thoughts on the LA Rams? Super Bowl contenders, or just, one and done, out in the wild card, out in the divisional round? Let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like and subscribe button if you did enjoy. I love you guys. Peace.